Hello, welcome to the section Working with Objects. In this section, I'm going to go over the basics of working with objects, working with some common and useful objects, an introduction to comparison and logical operators, working with objects in the pipeline, and finally, I'm going to show you how to create your own PowerShell objects with property names and values that you set. In this video, I'm going to teach you the basics of working with objects. Specifically, I'm going to teach you how to discover all about an object using getMember and the built-in method GetType. I'm going to show you how to find out details about the properties and methods that make up an object and how to find detailed descriptions and definitions from MSDN, that's the Microsoft Developer Network's online documentation. So let's get started. I'm going to start with a very basic object. The PS object on its own is an empty object, except for the base methods that are part of all .NET objects. This makes it a great choice to show you these built-in methods, or at least one in particular. I use the new object cmdlet to store the PS object in a variable called PS object. And now that I've got that basic object stored in a variable, I'm going to pipe it into the getMember cmdlet. I hope you'll remember getMember from a video in section 2, where I show you the most important commands in PowerShell. getMember is like shining a flashlight on the object, and it shows you everything about the object, including all properties and all methods. Now please take notice of the typename field at the top. This is the fully qualified name of the .NET object, which was piped into the getMember cmdlet. In the case of this very basic and empty object, you'll notice that the object has no properties. The only thing it has are a few methods. This could come in handy when you want to know exactly what type of an object you're working with. Before we dive any deeper into the properties and methods of an object, you'll want to know where you can find detailed descriptions and the final word on objects, their properties, and their methods. The best source for this information is usually the Microsoft Developer Network, MSDN. With the fully qualified type name from getMember or the class name from GetType, perform a search online and include the word MSDN in the search terms. You'll get some really great options at the top of your search results that point you to docs.microsoft.com. From there, you'll get everything you need to know about the objects. Now, some more on object properties. Since there are no properties on this object, we're going to take a look at an object that does have some. I'm going to save the spooler service as an object using the getService cmdlet and assign the output of getService to a variable. In many programming languages, to use a variable like this, you have to first declare the variable and specify that it's going to be a variable that holds a number or a string or an object, but PowerShell takes a lot of steps for you, and it figures out what kind of object the variable is going to be at the time of assignment. So you don't have to declare this spooler variable ahead of time. You can use it right away, and now that it's done, we can look at the properties of the service by referencing this variable. The output of this variable is the same as the output of the getService cmdlet, with one small exception. When I run getService, the cmdlet retrieves up-to-date information about the service at the time I run the command. If I store that in a variable, keep in mind that I can print out the contents of the variable over and over again without actually looking up the current state of the spooler service. And in a moment, I'm going to show you stop and start the spooler service. But first, let's look at the properties of this spooler service object. I'm going to pipe the object stored in spooler variable to getMember and specify that I'm only looking for object members that are properties. There's plenty of properties. For each of these, we have the name of the property and a definition. The definition starts with what type of object the property is. It can be a string like service name, or an integer, or a Boolean value, which is a true or false type like can stop. The definitions will clue you in right away on what type of object the property is, as you can see with the start type property. It shows that this start type is automatic, and you might think that's a string, but in the getMember output, it listed start type not as a string, but instead of a type called service start mode. Often, when you're working in PowerShell, you'll want to know what type a property is, and you can do that right from within PowerShell by using the getType method. Just like you can run the getType on the service object, you can also run getType on any property. This can be a really fast shortcut when you're working with different object types and properties, and when you want to know more about the start type object, you'll have a great reference at MSDN, which shows you exactly what you can choose and what those definitions mean. Let's take a quick look at methods. Methods are the actions that an object can perform. Let's take a quick look at methods. Methods are the actions that an object can perform. If there was an object that represented a car, then some properties would be make, model, year, color, top speed. The properties describe the object, but the methods are what the object can do. Methods of the car would include start engine, stop engine, accelerate, and brake. So what actions can we take with the spooler service? Just like properties, the methods are listed with the name and the definition. A difference here is that in a property, the type of the object is listed, but with a method we have a little bit more detail. The first object type in the definition is the object type which is output when the method is run. Using the same car analogy, you could imagine that a method called accelerate returns an integer that shows the new speed of the car. Some methods take an action and they don't provide any output at all. If that's the case, you'll see void. And that's the case often, as in start and stop. In the next part of the definition, you'll see some parentheses with more objects inside it. You can also get the method definitions by accessing the method name of the object just like a property. Anything in the parentheses, arguments that you pass into the method. Again, if you were to accelerate a car, you may pass in a number to indicate how many miles per hour you want to increase. Sometimes, like in the case of start, there's more than one definition for the method. In that case, the method can be run with any of the entries. Other times, like in the case of stop, there's only one. Even if you don't have any arguments to pass in, like stop, then the method still uses parentheses to invoke the method. Even if you don't have any arguments to pass in, the methods all use parentheses when you invoke them. If there aren't any arguments, just leave it empty between the parentheses. I mentioned before that the service object that I saved into the spooler variable doesn't get refreshed. It's a look at that spooler service at the time that I ran the getService commandlet. The variable still shows that it's running. If I look at the current status of the getService commandlet, it'll show the current status of the service, which is stop. Similar to stopping, you can also start the service with the same type of method. I wanted to point out really quickly that just because we've got these methods here, I don't want you to get into a pattern where you're using stop and start methods on the service object. There are commandlets that are built into that. So I use this as an example, and there are times then you'll want to be able to access a method from an object, but I also don't want you to forget the pattern that I set up before. When we want to know how to run something like stopping a service or starting a service, we use the get command to find commands, modify services. Then we can find out how to use them using the get help, and we can use the -online parameter to get detailed, up-to-date information. There's a lot to learn about PowerShell. At its core, PowerShell is a way of managing and working with an extensible collection of objects that describe every aspect of technology.